Hello everyone, welcome to CLG. Today we're going through the steps of installing a Linux distro. What you need? You need a USB stick with at least 8 GB of storage space, a working computer so you can set up your live USB, an app to flash the ISO to the USB, and knowledge how to access your system's UEFI menu. If you don't know which distro to download, check my other video. And for the app to flash the ISO to the USB, I'll be using Balena Etcher. Links for some user-friendly distros and for Balena Etcher are provided in the description below. I prefer using torrents over direct downloads to download the ISOs. I've had many erroneous direct downloads, especially with bad or unstable internet connections, which caused errors and instability after installation. If you decide to use direct downloads, you will need to validate them. After you pick your distro of choice, download it. Download also Balena Etcher. Plug in your USB. Run Balena Etcher. Select the ISO of the distro you have downloaded through Balena Etcher selection. Select the USB through Balena Etcher. Confirm your selections. Wait for Balena Etcher to finish. And after you have finished creating your live USB, you will need to restart your computer and access your UEFI settings. In order to access your UEFI settings, when powering up your computer, you need to press a specific key to access this menu. These keys vary from computer to computer. Here's a list I managed to find online. After reaching the settings screen, you need to change the boot order to USB first. With rolling release distros, you will need to disable secure boot. With stable releases, you can leave it enabled. The UEFI screen is different for each computer brand, but the general settings are similar. To navigate those settings, usually it's done by keyboard. On some computers though, you may be able to use your mouse, but control is made mostly by keyboard. After enabling USB boot and rebooting, there will be a prompt with a few options. One of them will be to boot with a live USB, if your USB is plugged in. And after a few seconds, or when you press enter, you will be directed to the live image. There you can test your selected distro and see how it works. Keep in mind that this image is immutable, no changes will be saved in the USB after you reboot. To use the system normally, you need to install it. The distros I've recommended in my previous video all follow similar installation patterns. All should have an easily identifiable installation option. This can either be on their start menu, on their desktop, or they may boot directly into the installer. All distros in a similar manner will ask you to set and confirm your keyboard layout and language. You can always add or remove more later. There is a screen that will ask you if you want to connect to the internet to fetch the latest updates. In some cases, the installer may ask if you want to send telemetry. You may toggle this according to your preference. The installer may also ask you if you want to use third-party drivers. I'd suggest to turn third-party drivers on. On some distros you may be prompted to select a desktop environment, but usually you get what you see in the live image. There is always a screen asking how you want to handle your storage. If you want to format your disk, erase everything on it, or if you want to install the system alongside an existing system, or if you want to set partitions manually. Here is not a clear-cut option. This one is up to you. Personally, I prefer manual partitioning. If you're not interested in manual partitioning, you can skip to the next chapter. Before starting the installation, you will need to fill your computer name, your login name, and your password, and if you want to log in automatically or by using your password. After all these steps are done, you can continue with the installation. After finishing the installation, you will be asked to remove the USB and restart. Congratulations! Now you have installed your Linux distro. Manual partitioning of your disk will give you more control on how to allocate your storage, and keeping your home folders in separate partitions will help in case you need to change your system or if you break something by mistake. If you plan on fully formatting your disk, which will erase everything on the disk, use the GPT partition table if not selected by default. Older computers may need to use the MBR setting, in which case avoid manual partitioning if possible, since disks using MBR cannot have more than 4 partitions. If the hardware you will be installing your distro is more than 10 years old, you should check if it supports UEFI, or stick with MBR if you're unsure. In any other case, use GPT. To add a partition, you need to click Create or a similar button. These partitions you need are a small partition with FAT32 file system for your bootloader. I use 500 MB on mount point /boot/EFI and with flag boot enabled. Depending on how much RAM you have, you may or may not need a Linux swap partition. If you have 16 GB or more RAM, then a swap partition is not needed, unless you are going to have heavy RAM usage. If you plan on using hibernation for your computer, you need a Linux swap partition. The size needs to be double of your RAM, so if you have 8 GB of RAM, you need 16 GB of swap. The file system for this partition is Linux swap or swap. Finally, set the partition for your system. Native applications are installed usually in the system partition. File system here should be Linux specific. If you decide to put all your data here, also give it all your remaining space. If you want to store your data in a different partition, then allocate about 100 GB for the system partition. Nowadays, new file systems pop up like BTRFS, and a few distros have adopted it. I'd suggest to go with your distro's default, usually ext4, if you're a newbie. Mount point should be / and the root flag enabled. I also like to keep my home folder on a different partition than my system. By doing so, I protect my files if I need to install a different distro in the future. To do that, you should make an empty partition, format it with the same file system as your system partition, and give it as much space as you can. The mount point should be /home without any flags. Inside the home folder is where your files are stored and is also the installation destination of sandboxed applications. Flat backups will be installed here, their configuration files will be here, games that you may install via Steam, GOG or Epic Games Store will be here, so you are going to need as much space as possible. All this should go in the home folder. Please don't be a mad person and install all of this on your system. I can't help you there, please don't. Avoid using Windows file systems like any FAT version or NTFS, since programs can misbehave because of it. I've encountered a lot of errors because of this. Especially if you plan on gaming, avoid them. Or at least avoid having Linux specific files in partitions with Windows file systems. If you opted for dual booting, some motherboards can opt to boot directly to one operating system or the other. If you install the Linux distro but you cannot seem to boot into it, and it boots to another OS instead, your installation went through fine, do not worry. What you need to do is go to your UEFI settings and change the operating system boot priority to Linux. The Linux bootloader will let you choose which system you want to use every time then. And that's all for today. I hope this video helped you out. If you have any suggestions or questions, leave a comment below. If you liked the video, click like, subscribe and all that. It will help the channel grow. Or if you didn't, leave a comment, tell me why. I want to do better next time. This is CLG and thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to have fun.